What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. It is time for a review of the new Insomnium record, Heart Like a Grave, out this past Friday, October 4th. What a beautifully depressing title. I fucking love it. Some of the most somber, heartbreaking, and just downright dismal music in metal does come from the melodic death metal genre. Think about it, bands like Dark Tranquillity, who are one of my personal favorites, Bellacore, Dark Lunacy, if you want to throw Opeth in there, who are sometimes, actually often mislabeled as just a pure prog band in their 90s and 2000s output. I mean, melancholy isn't necessarily the primary calling card for any of the bands I just mentioned, as it can be for bands within like the doom metal genre, for instance, but it has definitely played a role in all of their careers. Sadness and depression and hopelessness didn't really play a role at all on Insomnium's last record, Winter's Gate, which, I mean, I rarely use this term here, but was a stone cold masterpiece. Through basically one 40-minute long song, that's essentially how it was structured, it just took us on this epic journey of wonder and triumph and power and at times just sheer beauty. And of course, I'm speaking more musically than the actual narrative of the story, but sonically, it contained very little of the morbid emptiness that is suggested by the title here of its follow-up. And Heart Like a Grave, it's not a complete 180 from Winter's Gate by any sense, but it does take the band's sound in a considerably melancholic, detached, and definitely less aggressive direction than their previous material. And we'll discuss down the line some of the upsides as well as the downsides of this style change, but I'm actually going to argue here that regardless of change in style, disposition, or mood, the music on Heart Like a Grave is just less compelling and less engaging on a fundamental musical level, a compositional level, as opposed to their other material. Not just because they've gone in a slightly different direction stylistically. For instance, something that hurts this album greatly is that the intro and outro tracks here are remarkably unremarkable. And at a 10-minute plus runtime between the two of them, or if you can do math, 15% of the record, they really do not have their intended impact. And normally I'd actually say that having your weakest moments at the very beginning and very end of a record is kind of the best case scenario because you protect the meat of the record. But for a band like Insomnium that places a very high value on emotional scenery and a certain degree of atmosphere and dramatic entrances and exits, this is very hurtful. Corellia, the closer here, is so dull and overly minimalistic, both in terms of its dynamics, or lack thereof, and its musical repetition. It's just this total flatline. These same four notes played over and over and over again aren't nearly compelling enough to carry and serve as the backbone to supposedly this epic 7-minute outro to this album. They're just not compelling enough. They'd be compelling for like an interlude. They'd be compelling in any situation that doesn't require an emotional arc. But I'd argue that the outro to an album like this does require that. And then Wail of the North, which is the intro to the album, you know, the use of synths here is an interesting and unexpected touch. And there is a nice gradual build in the first half of this track. But the problem is, this track can't figure out whether it wants to be a fully fleshed out song or an intro. The way things just abruptly shift into those death metal tremolo riffs with like a minute left in the song is just like really jarring and has no context to it. And then right after this part, we revert right back to the original theme. So essentially what this song is one quick little death metal part sandwiched in between one giant loop. This song, it's neither a complete musical thought nor a grand entrance. It's just kind of stuck between the two. And I will mention also that the transition to Valediction, the next song, is kind of awkward. We go from this super reverby piano loop at the very end of Wail of the North right into this really plain, like Cataclysm style death metal riff. It just seems kind of odd to transition that way. It's not exactly a smooth jump, shall we say. So the band are noticeably underachieving in these instances, and they're underachieving elsewhere on the album. But the thing is that Insomnium are very talented, and so what you end up actually getting, realistically, is a bunch of songs that are not bad. They're just really middle of the road. Like Neverlast is a great example of this. It's pretty vanilla. It's a song that guitar-wise, the band Kalma have made already dozens of times, as well as Insomnium themselves on similar tracks like Out to the Sea, on Shadows of a Dying Sun. That's very similar guitar-wise to this one. And not to mention this triumphant chorus musically being paired with these super depressing and pessimistic lyrics just kind of rubs me wrong as being a mismatch. And the emotionless, robotic twin guitar solo in the middle of the song, as well as the outro solo, both miss the mark for me. But you'll notice that these are things that are a little bit more nitpicky, and that contextually, I'm more just indifferent to this song. And Bells They Toll, that's another mixed bag for me. Here we have just a stunning, beautifully solemn melody and chord progression leading the charge here, which, by the way, it's definitely that chord choice in the third quadrant of this theme that really is the key to it. And this is definitely an instance where I point to the sadder, more gray and despondent direction that Insomnium has gone with this record as being a big win. This song is absolutely haunting. And the guitars and the verses have sort of this droning ambiance to them that I really dig. But the clean vocals are so poorly executed. I think given the absolutely towering melody that anchors this song, the corresponding clean vocals should have been delivered with more of a mysterious, detached, emotionless a la Agalloch than the expressive vibrato that they're sung with here. It almost has a little bit of whine to it. They're kind of mismatched. The melody and chords on one hand and the clean vocals on the other hand. And the kind of lumbering, chugging guitars in the chorus are also a mistake. And I think by the end of this track, what was once just an absolutely entrancing melodic theme has been somewhat diluted. But again, these are songs that I'm mixed on. The only song on Heart Like a Grave that has zero appeal for me is Mute Is My Sorrow, which I think is kind of the downside of Insomnium's evolution on this album. It's just kind of sluggish at parts. There's no melodic appeal that cuts through. There's just this oversaturation of twin guitar harmonies trying to fill all the extra space. And when the band do revert back to their typical pedal tone melodic death metal guitar riffing, it just feels very generic and very tired. Definitely my least favorite song on the album. But I am now officially out of negatives, so I get to praise other parts of the record that are great, like the fucking title track, which is absolutely amazing. I like it more and more now since I originally heard it as a single. And what's especially impressive on this track is how, in contrast to my earlier critiques of Corellia, essentially one melody here is carried through an acoustic intro, an electric intro, basically a whole verse, basically the chorus with some variations here. This is where Insomnium's more sad, moodier, dialed down approach just works absolute wonders on this record. And on Pale Morning Star, which is my other favorite. That simple little piano line with all the reverb on it just gives this track an absolutely desolate mood. I fucking love it. Love the harmonized acoustic guitars that sit underneath it and just how effortless the transition is from this part into electric guitars and pummeling double bass. The guitars in general are just so on point in this song. I love the tremolo riffs. I love the rhythmically twisty-turny melody lines and how they're still catchy. I love the acoustic guitar that comes in after the solo. I love the symphonic elements at the end of this track. And this song just has an incredibly effective use of dynamics, the way things gradually come down after the guitar solo for about half a minute before settling nicely into that acoustic part, which has just beautiful piano over it. The song just has so many layers to it. It's magnificent. And I should mention Twilight Trails as another highlight. That song and The Offering are both instances where you can audibly hear the Winter's Gate style really resurface prominently. And I will say that Heart Like a Grave joins Winter's Gate in the ranks of best sounding Insomnium record, and I think that in the style of music they play, a little bit of polish is actually a very good thing. This is a very, very good sounding record. In fact, both production-wise and stylistically, hearing the evolution of Insomnium since the records that got me into the band, I gotta say, I do like how they have shed some of that blatant Swedish worship that really characterized some of their earlier records like Above the Weeping World and made it somewhat derivative in a sense. Although I do miss the chunk and the anger of a record like Across the Dark. So sure, this record is pretty vanilla at points. It really is sort of wallpapery on the tracks that I mentioned not being too fond of. But it's also true that I do hold Insomnium to a slightly higher standard and always have. So while it's very important to me to articulate the underachievement that I see going on in this album, because I don't imagine any other Insomnium fans will, that also doesn't mean that it's bad. It's not bad. It's underwhelming, and when I do return to the record, I will be cherry-picking tracks, which is rare for me in Insomnium, but I do think there's going to be a lot to enjoy for melodic death metal fans on here. Heart Like a Grave gets a 6 out of 10 from me. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, as well as checking out any other rock or metal-related content that I publish here on a weekly basis. Really appreciate you watching, liking, disliking, commenting, just engaging in any fashion. Twitter, Instagram handle @RyanPanMusic. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon.